Mason, do you want to send him into my room? Miss Hawkins? Okay. Okay, so when I was a little girl, I grew up in a big city. And in a big city, people usually have big houses and little tiny yards, right? In the country, at my grandma's house, she had a little tiny house, but she had a great big yard that we could play in. In the city, when you're hungry, where do you go? To the grocery store. You go to the grocery store and you get your grocery cart and you go up and down the aisles and you pick up food and you put it in your cart, and that's where food comes from. If you want a drink in the city, you go to your sink and you get your cup and you turn the tap on and out comes the water. Or if you're outside and you're thirsty, you turn the hose on and you get a drink, right? In the country, more especially at my grandma's house, when we were hungry, we would go out to the garden and pick something off the garden. Or we'd go out to the fruit trees and pull an apple off the tree and eat it. If we were really thirsty, we'd go to the little stream that was right by my grandma's house and we'd get a drink right out of the stream. So we didn't go to the hose. She had a hose and she had a faucet, but we would drink out of the stream. In just a minute, Mason. And then when in the summertime when I was a little kid in the city, when it was so hot and we'd get so tired and we needed to cool down, we'd all get out, my brothers and I, we'd get out our pool and we'd put it on the yard, and then there was 5 of us, we'd try and play in the water. But there was only enough room for all of us to stand in the pool. We could kick the water on each other's feet, but there wasn't enough room for all of us to sit down and play in the water. So we were so excited when it was time to go to Grandma's house. When it was time for us to get to go to Grandma's house and help with the water turn. So Grandma would call and say, I need your help. Can you come down to Santa Quinn and help us with the water turn? So we'd all get in the car and we'd head down to Santa Quinn. Once we got there, my grandma's great big yard, and then right next to that she had a big pasture. A pasture is a place where horses would usually stay. But my grandma didn't keep horses anymore, so she let the grasses just grow. Do you know how tall they got? This tall. Do you know how tall we were? This tall. The grass was up above us. It was so tall, it was taller than we were. So we played a really, really fun game. We called it hide and go seek, but it was just a little bit different. So one person would count, just like in hide and go seek. And they'd turn around and they'd cover their eyes and they'd start counting. 1, 2. The rest of us would sneak off as quietly as we could. And then we'd find a nice spot in the grass and we'd curl down in a little tiny ball, as small as we could be. And because the grass was so tall, you couldn't even see us. And when the person finally finished counting, ready or not, here I come, they'd look and all they could see is grass. So they'd start wading through the grass. Where are they? Where are you? And then once they get kind of close to us, because you can't see, we'd jump out and we'd run and try and touch home before the next person, before you got caught. If you got caught, you had to be the seeker and somebody else could go by. So another really fun thing that we loved to do at my grandma's house is that we would help with the water turn. We'd go and the water would come straight from the mountains. The snow would melt and it would come straight down to my grandma's house. That water was freezing cold, so cold. We'd put our toes in and we'd get goosebumps all over our body because it was so cold. Well, to do the water turn, the water comes down through a stream and then it gets directed into a ditch. When it's somebody's turn to do the water turn, you have to go to where there's gates. My mom would always do this part because we were too little. You had to stand over the ditch and you'd grab the gate and you'd pull and pull, and it was really hard because there's so much water, and she'd finally get it out and sometimes she fell over. It was so funny to see my mom fall into the ditch. As soon as she got it out, she'd put it in a different direction and that would make the water go to my grandma's house. And as soon as that started, my brothers and I, we would race to stay caught up with the water. And we'd have to go over rocks and around trees to try and stay caught up with that water. And then finally it went through the great big trees, and it got to the pasture, which was kind of flat. And there was a little tiny shallow ditch that was dug. And this is where we would race our stick boats. Everybody had a stick boat. We would rub it on the ground to get all the pokey parts off. And then sometimes we would paint them so we knew whose was whose. And then there was one spot that we decided was the starting point. And we'd all stand around this stream. We'd hold our sticks all at the same level, and we'd go 1, 2, 3, and we'd drop our sticks, and then we would run to follow with our sticks until it got to the finish line to see who was first, who won the stick race. We would do that several times, about 3 or 4 times, and then we'd decide, this is boring. This is way too boring. So do you know what we would do? One person would get all the sticks at the starting point. Everybody else would reach down into the stream and get great big globs of mud, or they'd get rocks or something else that they could throw at the boats. And we'd yell, ready! And then the person would drop them, and then we'd throw our rocks and throw our mud right at our sticks to try and sink them. But guess what happened when we did that? The water and the mud got all over us. We were covered in mud. We looked like mud monsters. We were so covered in mud. And that's when my mom or my grandma would say, head to the ocean, you're too dirty. We lived in Utah. The ocean was way far away. But there was one part in the pasture that was dug down so that it would leave a pond for the horses to drink water. But since there weren't any more horses drinking water, it was our ocean. We'd go to the ocean and we'd play in the water. There was one spot in the water that had 2 big boulders. We'd sit right between those 2 big boulders and we'd put our arms on either side, and we would become the king or the queen of the whole ocean. And that person got to decide what kind of games they played. We could tell them, you have to race from this end of the pond to the other. You have to swim from this end of the pond to the other. Or our favorite one to do was gladiators, or Olympics, where we would tell everybody, you start over there and you start over there, and then we'd say, go! And then we'd chase each other through the water and try and capture each other. And then the wrestling match would start. We'd push and shove and try and dunk the other person. As soon as they got dunked, they were declared the loser, and the winner got to go and be the new king or queen sitting in the throne. Once we'd done that for a while, and our fingers and our toes were all wrinkly like prunes, then we'd have to go for our outdoor shower. And our outdoor shower meant that we had to go back to the house, not in the house because we were pretty muddy. We'd have to stand there, and my mom or my grandma would get the hose out and they'd spray us down with water, and we'd have to turn around until we were all pink again. No more mud. Once that was done, then we got to have our popsicles, and we'd go sit on Grandma's porch, and we'd sit and we'd lick our popsicles. Everybody had their favorite color of popsicle. Some liked blue, some liked red. I liked purple because it turned your tongue purple. That was my favorite part. And as we sat there, every single time we decided that that was the best day ever. The end.